Today I'm releasing a majority staff report by the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations evaluating the repatriation tax break in 2004. Now, a huge lobbying effort is underway to convince Congress to repeat this tax break, this tax holiday for a few corporations at the expense of the rest of us. It was a $3 billion mistake the first time around, and this threatens to become either a $40 or an $80 billion mistake if it's repeated. And I'll go into those numbers in a moment. So we just simply cannot afford a corporate tax break, which is going to push more jobs, more operations, more investments offshore, and would increase the use of tax gimmicks, things like the transfer of patents and copyrights and trademarks to offshore corporations. Another problem, beside the fact that this would be a huge loss to the Treasury and we're trying to reduce the deficit, not increase it, is the fact that this kind of an incentive, a tax incentive, will give companies another reason to move jobs overseas. We can't afford to lose more jobs in this country. We're trying to create jobs in this country, not lose jobs in this country. But this kind of a tax incentive will result in a loss of jobs. Companies will see that they can reduce their taxes by moving operations, moving money overseas. So it exactly has it has the opposite effect of what we really need in this country, which is job creation. If you give companies a reason to move their operations or move money overseas, that costs us jobs instead of saving us jobs. It is also unfair to the 96 or 97% of the companies who keep their operations here. For them to compete with companies that are paying a 5% tax rate because they move their operations overseas while they're paying up to a 35% corporate tax rate is unfair to the companies that stay. And so that kind of a preference for the few at the expense of the many is one of the reasons why we've got so much frustration and so much anger in this country. One of the arguments which has been made is that the lower tax rate will increase research and development money here, or research and development operations and activities here, and will create jobs here. We have looked specifically at the top 15 corporations that brought back funds during this tax holiday back in 2004. We decided to look at the top repatriators, so-called, to try to get an idea as to precisely what did they do with the funds that they brought back because they were given a much lower tax rate. We found that, as a matter of fact, after repatriating $155 billion, the top 15 repatriating corporations reduced their overall workforce by nearly 21,000 jobs. As to research and development, the same 15 multinationals that we looked at in detail experienced, again, the influx of $155 billion in repatriated funds in 2005 and 2006. There was no net boost in their domestic research and development expenditures in the following year. As a matter of fact, the pace of their investments slightly declined in the following 2 years. The law that was passed back in 2004 expressly prohibited using repatriated dollars on stock buybacks or executive compensation. Both categories of spending, however, increased in the top 15 repatriating corporations. For instance, at those 15 corporations, the total compensation of the top 5 executives collectively increased, top 5 executive compensation increased 27% from 2004 to 2005, and 30% from 2005 to 2006. Now, a 30% increase in compensation, executive compensation in 1 year is a pretty big jump even for CEOs. Now, folks, this issue that is being debated by the Congress these days is a critical issue in many ways. It's a vital issue in terms of job creation, because allowing these companies to bring back these profits overseas is simply an incentive on for these companies to move their operations overseas. That's common sense, but it's also what the Joint Tax Committee says. And that's one of the reasons why we lose money over 10 years, is because you have to factor in that companies will locate overseas or find ways to shift their patents and copyrights to wholly owned subsidiaries or shell companies in tax havens overseas in order to reduce their tax payments to Uncle Sam. So this is a big deficit reduction issue. We're in the middle of a battle as to how do we reduce our deficits. And here, what's being considered now is a proposal that could cost the Treasury over 10 years, depending on how you calculate it, either about $40 billion or $80 billion in order to pick up the few $billion that you would gain from the reduced tax rate incentive in the first few years. This issue is right in the heart of the current battle. It's whether we should have provisions in our tax code giving tax breaks to the few, which will not only move jobs overseas, will not only increase the deficit, but are being given to the few at the expense of the many. So what's going on in Congress and what's going on in our communities, in our homes and on demonstrations in the streets, go to the heart of this very issue: fairness in our tax code, whether we're going to treat all of our citizens the same or give special tax breaks to the few, deficit reduction, job creation. All those issues are kind of focal, have a focus right smack in what this repatriation debate is all about. And that's why it's important that our subcommittee look at in great detail what happened last time. And that's what we do. And we show that the arguments which were made then and which were being made again, that somehow or other this is going to create jobs in the United States when the evidence is the opposite, that this is going to bring in money to Uncle Sam when the evidence is the opposite, that those arguments need to be addressed and defeated.